will not be afraid. What can a mere man do to me?
Follow the sound of Lincoln's cannons.
Hello, I'm Flavia. How's it going?
Oh, it's lovely, Flavia.
I've seen your film yesterday and I'm still shaking. It was really tough for me. No kidding. Because it's also graphic, like violence is real. We are in kind of a surreal time. Many people are kind of forgetting that the danger is next door. I wish you could speak about this, because Will, I know you turned out other films set in slavery. So why Emancipation now? And also you, Antoine, why this film, which is so violent, but we know things can be violent.
For me, one of the major reasons I wanted to make this film now, I had a deep sense of the personal misunderstanding of the history. I had seen this picture of Peter, but as I did the just most basic research, I realized how little I knew. And as I started to go deeper and deeper into the understanding of Peter, I felt that there were really critical lessons, really critical ideas that potentially were being lost to this generation. And for me, I thought the idea of diving into emancipation yesterday would have a high value to understanding emancipation today. A lot of the same difficulties, a lot of the same concepts are beginning to rear their heads again in modern day. And I hope that the audience will have a lot of the same revelations and comprehensions about things like the power of faith and the power of love over the power of attack and defense. And it was just so rich, and Peter's life was so rich that I was impelled to tell this story.
Yeah, I agree with Will. I had to tell the story of emancipation. It touched me in every way you could possibly imagine. It grabbed my heart, to watch the love for the family. It obviously affected me quite a bit. Slavery and the brutality of slavery, the ugliness of slavery. I don't think you can blink if you're going to make a film about slavery, because it was all about brutality. It was forced labor. And I feel somehow emancipation felt modern. And it could just be because, as you said, the world, sometimes we forget. And, as you get older as a person, as I get older, you start to see some of the same patterns. And it's scary to see that. And as human beings, we seem to forget how to treat each other. And we forget the past. So I felt it was important to show the film and be true to the brutality, but also be true to the love and the faith, as Will mentioned, that Peter
had. I agree. I think it's also about resilience and fight against ignorance. You know what I mean? Like in Brazil, we've seen some protests. I'm not kidding, from the right-hand people with the Confederates flag in Brazil. You know what I mean? Wow. It's totally ignorance because they don't know the symbol, and I think you said, well, it was the most difficult film that you ever made, physically and emotionally.
Yeah, you made a good point about ignorance. I think the combination of ignorance and fear create what we know and think of as evil, right? The concept of evil is almost exclusively ignorance blended with fear. And I feel like the only elixir for that is to be able to create some kind of empathy through understanding. So for me, when I make a film like this, the hope is that through the understanding, through the depiction, that no one will be able to sit in that audience and not have a spark of compassion and empathy develop in their heart. And the clearing of those kinds of historical confusions, I think will go a long way in, tamping down some of the hateful rhetoric that is happening from the voices of ignorance, on both sides. It's not a side, it's all of us.
I heard it myself. Slaves are free. Sasu.
As I told Will and Antoine, I saw the film yesterday. I'm still processing it, and it was so tough for me. No kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm really honest. And but at the same time, we in Brazil, we have very important, civil rights movement. Women, Black women are, the great ones who fight for it. So I really admire them, my friends who fight. So I wish you, as a woman in this film, and just such a story about men fighting, how did you approach, your character? She's so great, but she's full of love and resilience.
And it's a beautiful counterpoint to the majority of the energy in the film. I mean, there's a lot of, it's a lot of masculine energy and, a lot of fighting, a lot of violence. And I felt really honored to play her because I feel like in so many ways, she's the heart. She's his heart, and she's the heart of her family. And she's the reason that he keeps going. And like you were saying before, I think it was really important to me, especially to make sure she had significance, because, we often know that women, and Black women in particular, are often the unsung heroes, but they're often the linchpin of families and of communities. And I really wanted to make sure that she was given her due.
My family is with me.
I really like the idea that she's not passive, which is really important, like resisting. To resist is not being passive. So how did you and Antoine and Will, discuss way of being, of existing? Because I think it took a lot of resilience. It takes still now, to Black people fight for their rights, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, we know in those times as well that women not only had to do the same amount of physical labor, but they would have to come home and run the household and mend clothes and make sure that everyone else was happy. And they always often put everyone else's feelings and needs ahead of their own, just to make sure their family unit functions. And in no way did I see her husband or anyone be a victim to their circumstances. So it was very important to me that she had a strength of will. I mean, the things that she ends up having to do in that film, almost unimaginable. So she had to be empowered. And even though I'm sure she just wanted to crumple down in a corner in so many times, but she just had to carry on and hold on, like she says in the film, and make sure that everyone else around her was holding on to.
What if he don't come back?
Your papa is going to be back. Do not ever stop believing that.
Also in Brazil, like in cinema, our candidate for Oscar this year is the film with only Black characters, but living a normal life, a love life, a family life, which is really strong and symbolic as well, especially in Brazil, where racism is still strong. So, but Emancipation, on the other hand, it's about, resistance to violence. And it's a violent film, it's graphic sometimes, but there's this importance. How do you see this, Emancipation now in this contemporary story?
Yeah, I think it's a story that is still as relevant. The message is still so relevant today, almost more than any other time in history. One of survival and triumph. And yes, there's definitely violent elements to the film, but at the end of the day, we know what it's serving for Peter. And obviously he's usually the object of the violence. But there's something about the dignity in the way that the family resist, and the cleverness in the way that they come up with ways to try and get out of their circumstances. It's like they're really, it's quite ingenious. And, I think the strength is more than the physical strength. It's the strength of will that gets them through.
And character.
And character, absolutely.
We must get to Bem-vindos, 5 days through this swamp. There are many ways to die in a swamp.
Hi, Ben. How's it going?
Hi, Flavia. Nice to meet you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And good to see you, in a civil person, as a normal person, because it was really tough for me watching the film, You did a great job because it was really hard to watch. It's such a hard but important film. So I wish you could, speak a little bit about how did you approach your character, because it's easy to hate him. And how did you, give him some humanity and deal with his shadows?
Working with Antoine, our director, we worked closely to explore the trauma of hate. Where does hate come from? And we had many conversations about where does white fear come from, particularly white male fear come from. And in our country, it certainly hasn't been resolved. So we endeavored, rather than to initially the character was written as a American Southern man that signaled what you would call the bad guy, snake, skull on his hat and things like that. And as we discovered the character together, it felt important to me that we take all those things away and just put them right in the middle of the country, someone who sounds like they're from the middle of America, who could look like a farmer, a pastor, your friend, your neighbor. And to us, that became far more terrifying and all the more relevant to what we're dealing with in our country today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In Brazil as well, like nowadays, we are after elections, and far right is like struggling in the middle of the streets, asking for new elections. And I've seen, no kidding, Confederates flags in these protests, which is surreal. You know what I mean? Like surreal things are happening all over the world, and what you said about the white men, also women. I think men are more, symbolic in the sense of races. I really think that films like your film are necessary. You know what I mean? Like we are discussing, we want to see Black characters in different type of stories as normal people, but even though in this surreal time, we need to remember people again and again that is next door. The danger is next door. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. It's happening all over the world right now. What's most important and why you hope a film has resonance and meaning and value is that it can be entertaining and remind us, though, through adversity, when we aim towards a democracy, which is a fragile concept, we have to fight for that with love. And that's for our fellow human. That's why we have to keep telling these stories over and over again. How do we get a little bit further? And when we take a step back, we've got to push a little bit further. This film is about fighting for freedom and ultimately for love. It's your family, it's your loved ones, it's your neighbor. We're just people. We're not here for very long. So let's not keep making the same mistakes.
I agree. I have to wrap, but I really love the scene where your character is bringing something from his childhood, and you can see his humanity and you see the frustration. And I think everything begins in childhood as well. So we need to tell stories to the young ones.
We carry our traumas. Let us heal them.
That's true. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for your character and for your film. I hope everybody can see it, also in Brazil.
Thank you, Flavia.
I will look in triumph at my enemies.